For thousands of years, it was nothing more than dust. A stretch of sun-baked earth, cracked by time and scorched by an unforgiving sky. The kind of place that whispered of absence. No flowing waters, no greenery, no signs of what once was. Just silence, heat, and emptiness. Generations passed without ever knowing that something monumental had once lived beneath their feet. A mighty river, older than any kingdom, once coursed through this land, breathing life into everything it touched. It was forgotten, buried by centuries of shifting sand and memory. But now, impossibly, unbelievably, it has returned. What has unfolded in recent weeks has left scientists, historians, and eyewitnesses stunned. An ancient river, lost for over 5,000 years, has begun to flow once more. Water is carving its way through the earth again, as if time has reversed itself, as if nature is resurrecting a story it buried long ago. The impossible is happening, and no one can fully explain it. This isn't just some puddle formed by a seasonal rain. This is a fully realized river, wide and deep, with a current strong enough to carry sediment and shape the land anew. It cuts through ground that has been lifeless for millennia, awakening ecosystems and rewriting maps in real time. Villages that once stood far from any water source now find themselves at the edge of a riverbank. Crops are growing where there was once only sand. Local wildlife has started to return, and those who live near it say the change has been nothing short of biblical. But as breathtaking as the scene is, the questions it raises are even more staggering. Where did this water come from? How could a river disappear for 5,000 years and simply start flowing again? Could this be the result of deep tectonic movement, a long-dormant underground spring bursting free, or is there something else at work, something that science hasn't yet begun to understand? To even begin answering these questions, we have to travel far back in time, back before our modern understanding of geography, before nations and borders, before written language was common. We must look to a time when ancient civilizations relied on rivers as their very lifeblood. These great water systems weren't just sources of survival, they were sacred. Rivers shaped economies, fed armies, carried myths. Entire belief systems formed around them. And when they vanished, so too did the cultures they once sustained. Archaeological records have long hinted at the existence of a now-lost river in this region. Sediment layers, buried tools, fossilized plant matter, silent clues buried under meters of hardened soil. But until now, it remained nothing more than a theory. A ghost of the past, spoken of in quiet academic circles and dismissed as speculative at best. No one seriously believed that this river would ever be seen again in the modern age. This discovery is forcing experts to rethink everything we thought we knew about the region's climate history, its seismic stability, and even the behavior of deep earth aquifers. How much of our planet's hydrological memory is hidden beneath layers of stone and sand? Could there be other rivers, other sources of life, waiting beneath arid zones around the world? And if this can happen once, can it happen again? The implications are staggering, not just for the scientific community, but for the world at large. Entire communities are being reshaped. Livelihoods are transforming overnight. Environmentalists see hope in a time of global water scarcity. Others see something more ominous, an unpredictable Earth, revealing long-forgotten forces without warning. There are stories now, strange ones. Locals speak of the ground trembling slightly before the water emerged, of animals gathering days beforehand, behaving as if they sensed something that humans could not. There's even talk of unusual lights in the sky, sudden temperature drops, and other strange occurrences that preceded the river's rebirth. Coincidence? Or signs of something we don't yet understand? This is more than a fluke of nature. It is a revelation, a rediscovery that challenges the boundaries of what we thought was possible. As researchers rush to study the site, as experts scramble to understand the geological mechanics behind the event, one thing is certain: this ancient river is rewriting the story of the land. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's trying to tell us something. What secrets lie beneath its shimmering surface? What forgotten truths are buried in the mud and clay it carries downstream? And what chain of events, whether natural or not, could possibly have led to the rebirth of something lost for 5 millennia. As the river flows forward, so does the mystery. And the deeper we look, the stranger the story becomes. Before we continue, I would like to encourage you to consider subscribing and liking the video. Thanks for your support thus far, and let's continue with the video. There's something hauntingly beautiful about water reclaiming a place that had long forgotten its touch. When the images of the Reappeared River first made their rounds, first as fuzzy satellite scans, then as sweeping aerial footage capturing the gleaming silver thread cutting through the dry, brittle earth, scientists, locals, and observers alike were left stunned. Not because the river was simply there again, but because of what it meant. For thousands of years, this region had been dry. Not just seasonally arid or periodically parched, but bone-dry, barren and hardened by centuries of wind erosion and sun-scorched days. Its very identity had become tied to its lifelessness. The idea that a flowing body of water could return to such a place seemed absurd. But yet, here it was, rushing, winding, pulsing with force and volume. So naturally, questions followed. And among the many hypotheses and speculations that began to bubble to the surface, one rose with quiet consistency: that this was not a miracle in the mystical sense, nor some freakish, unexplainable accident of nature. It was geological. Deeply so. That somewhere far beneath the dust and stone, the earth had quietly loosened its grip on something old, and water, ancient, hidden, and pure, had finally found its release. To fully grasp the weight of this theory, we have to go back, not just decades, but thousands, even tens of thousands of years. Before modern civilization built cities or recorded history, the planet was writing its own chronicles in the language of tectonics, erosion, and climate cycles. Back then, the area now under scrutiny might have looked very different. Lush even. Verdant with forests, teeming with animal life, and crisscrossed by natural waterways. But as climates shifted, ice ages came and went, and the planet tilted and turned on its astronomical axis, everything began to change. Rainfall patterns moved. Green became brown. Rivers dried up. Life either adapted or moved on. But the water? It didn't disappear. It simply sank deeper. Not all of it, of course, but enough. Enough to form what we now call fossil aquifers, vast underground lakes and reservoirs sealed beneath layers of sediment and time. These fossil aquifers are not your average underground water sources. They're not the sort of aquifers that are replenished each year by rainfall or mountain runoff. No, these are much older. Some are millions of years old, trapped beneath bedrock so deep and so thick that their contents haven't seen sunlight since before the pyramids were built, before cities rose, before even the earliest records of writing were etched into stone. They exist in near-perfect isolation, encased by geological pressure, waiting in the dark, silent and undisturbed. Scientists have long marveled at them, mostly through data modeling and deep core drilling, occasionally retrieving samples of this prehistoric water for study. And time and again, the findings have been staggering, not just for the purity of the water, but for the stories it carries. The mineral content, the isotopic signatures, clues to climates and ecosystems long gone. It's as if the Earth has its own memory, archived in subterranean vaults of water. Now, imagine such a vault, sealed tight for 5,000 years or more, being suddenly breached. Not by human action necessarily, though in some cases, deep drilling or fracking can cause unexpected pressure shifts, but more likely by the slow, natural processes of the Earth itself. A fault line flexing ever so slightly. A minor but persistent shift in the sediment layers. Subterranean erosion silently carving out a path over the course of centuries. Eventually, a crack forms, tiny at first, but enough. And under immense pressure, that ancient water begins to move. At first, it seeps, saturating nearby rock and old sediment. Then, encouraged by gravity and the path of least resistance, it flows. Maybe it follows an old riverbed, one long buried by sand and time, but still faintly etched into the underground landscape. And from there, the miracle unfolds in slow motion. The river reawakens. What makes this possibility so compelling is how quietly it could have happened. There might have been no earthquakes, no tremors, no obvious precursors. Just a subtle rearrangement of the Earth's underbelly. And because these aquifers can hold staggering volumes of water, some estimates suggest hundreds of cubic kilometers, it wouldn't take much of a breach to unleash a visible, flowing body of water on the surface. The reappearance of the river, then, isn't a sudden gift from the heavens, but the result of millennia-long underground processes finally converging. And that convergence, while stunning, may be completely natural. A whisper from the past made audible again through the rush of water over dry earth. As we continue to explore the theory of deep ancient aquifers being the cause of the reappearing river, it's important to understand just how massive and ancient these underground water sources can be. Fossil aquifers, which are essentially ancient underground reservoirs of water, are not your typical groundwater sources that we use today. The key difference is that fossil aquifers have been sealed away from the surface environment for thousands, or even millions, of years. These water bodies have remained hidden beneath the Earth's crust, essentially in stasis, untouched by modern-day weather patterns or even the natural flow of rivers and streams. Their origins are tied to periods of Earth's history that were far different from what we see now. Think of them as vast underground oceans, formed when the climate was radically different, often much wetter, with higher rainfall rates and ecosystems that no longer exist. Over time, these aquifers became sealed off, often by thick layers of rock or layers of hardened soil. Once trapped, the water remained, preserved by the geological conditions that sealed it in place. However, beneath this stillness, the Earth is constantly shifting. These shifts may be barely perceptible at the surface, but underground, things are constantly changing. Tectonic plates shift. Pressure builds up. Faults move. Even the smallest disruption in the Earth's crust can cause a chain reaction. In the case of this particular river, scientists suggest that it could have been a tiny crack or fault deep underground that allowed pressure to slowly release, opening a passage for the water to flow. When that pressure finally broke through, whether from a seismic event, a slow movement of tectonic plates, or even just the natural settling of the land, the ancient water trapped beneath could suddenly find its way to the surface, causing what seems like a miraculous return of the river. This type of event is rare, but not impossible, and it explains why the river seems to have appeared almost out of nowhere, with no major natural disaster preceding it. One of the most intriguing aspects of this theory is the idea that this water has been sitting, undisturbed, for so long. The water in these aquifers isn't just any water, it's incredibly old. In fact, it could be water that was deposited during a time when the environment was dramatically different. The conditions underground, cut off from the atmosphere for millennia, allowed the water to develop a unique composition. Researchers studying these ancient waters have found that the mineral content is often significantly different from what we see in modern groundwater. This could provide clues about the region's past climate and ecosystem, showing scientists what life was like when this water was first stored away deep beneath the surface. But why did this river remain hidden for so long? Well, for many centuries, the region was likely not an area of interest. The land above the aquifer had dried up. Without the surface signs of flowing water, no one thought to look below for any sort of ancient reservoirs. It was only with advancements in technology, particularly satellite imagery and modern geological surveys, that researchers began to notice unusual patterns, subtle signs of what might be an underground river or aquifer waiting to be tapped. Additionally, the land's surface may have simply been too stable for such a flow to surface until now. While the land may have been dry for thousands of years, the deep-seated aquifer could have slowly been building up pressure over that time. If a slight change in the underground terrain occurred, whether from shifts in the Earth's crust or gradual changes in the surrounding rock, the floodgates, so to speak, could have opened. Suddenly, what was once a still, contained body of water deep beneath the Earth has found its way to the surface once more. But how long will it last? Could this river continue to flow for years, or will it eventually dry up once the aquifer has been tapped out? It's hard to say. Some fossil aquifers contain massive amounts of water, enough to keep a river flowing for decades or longer, while others may be more limited in scope, offering only a short-lived burst of water. In either case, the reappearance of the river is a reminder of the hidden forces of nature that are constantly at play beneath our feet, forces that we don't fully understand. The mineral content of the water will likely tell scientists a lot about how long the aquifer has been isolated, and what kind of climate it originally came from. For example, if the water shows signs of high mineral content, it could indicate that it has been sitting in a sealed environment for millions of years, untouched by any rainfall or surface runoff. If the water appears relatively fresh, with low mineral levels, it could suggest a more recent origin, possibly from the distant past but not quite as ancient as we might expect. These clues will help scientists understand just how much time has passed since this water was last exposed to the surface. Additionally, the reappearance of the river could be part of a larger pattern that scientists have only just begun to notice. Fossil aquifers are not as rare as we might think. They can be found in many dry, arid regions around the world. Some have already been tapped for use by humans, while others remain largely untouched. This raises an interesting possibility. If this river has reappeared after 5,000 years, could other forgotten rivers or underground water sources be waiting to be discovered? And could this be a sign that our planet's hydrological systems, long thought to be fixed and predictable, are much more dynamic than we ever realized? It's also worth noting that this theory of ancient aquifers releasing their waters may not only explain the reappearance of the river in this particular region, but it could also be a part of a much larger and more profound trend in Earth's geology. The process of water moving underground and coming to the surface may be more common than we think, but it's only through advancements in technology and research that we are beginning to recognize these hidden phenomena. As we continue to look at this astonishing reappearance, one thing becomes clear: the Earth's history is far more active, dynamic, and unpredictable than we could have ever imagined. And while the surface may seem calm, beneath the crust, there are powerful forces at work, shaping the world in ways we may not even fully comprehend yet. The river that suddenly emerged after 5,000 years might just be the beginning of a much deeper, more mysterious story about the forces of nature beneath our feet. While the theory of ancient underground aquifers releasing their long-contained waters presents a fascinating explanation for the reappearance of the river, it's far from the only possibility. In fact, there are other natural phenomena at play that could have contributed to this extraordinary event. As we've already seen, underground aquifers are vast, mysterious systems that hold water for millennia, but they are far from the only forces that shape the land and watercourses beneath our feet. Another intriguing possibility lies in the dynamic and often unpredictable nature of tectonic plate movements, and how these massive geological shifts might have triggered the return of a river that had long been lost to time. Tectonic plate movements are one of the most powerful and far-reaching natural processes on Earth. These enormous sections of the Earth's crust are in constant motion, though we rarely notice it. The tectonic plates that make up the surface of our planet are not static. Instead, they float atop the Earth's mantle, slowly moving over time. This movement can be almost imperceptible on human timescales, but over millions of years, it has reshaped entire continents and created the landscapes we see today. When these plates interact, they can cause earthquakes, volcanic activity, and even the shifting of entire river systems. But what does this have to do with a river that has been absent for 5,000 years? One of the main ways tectonic movements could explain the reappearance of the river is by the shifting or displacement of the land above the underground water source. The Earth's crust is not a single, solid piece. It is fractured into many different segments, or plates, that constantly move and collide with each other. Sometimes these movements cause the land to either sink or rise, a process known as uplift and subsidence. In areas where tectonic activity is particularly intense, the land can shift dramatically over relatively short periods of time. If the area where the ancient riverbed lay was subjected to significant tectonic shifts, it could have created the right conditions for the river to emerge once more. Imagine a region that has been stable for thousands of years, with no obvious signs of movement on the surface. Then, over a period of time, whether due to the collision of two tectonic plates or the shifting of fault lines beneath the Earth's crust, something begins to happen beneath the surface. The land begins to sink, or perhaps, in some cases, rise. In such a scenario, a river that had been trapped deep underground, flowing through ancient channels, could suddenly find its path cleared by the movements of the Earth's plates. This process might take a long time to unfold, but when it happens, it can result in the sudden reappearance of water that was thought to be lost forever. In fact, the role of tectonic plate movements in the reappearance of lost rivers is not a new concept. Scientists have long known that tectonic shifts can redirect water flow, especially when new fault lines or cracks are introduced into the Earth's crust. By disrupting the natural channels that once carried a river, tectonic activity could cause the water to follow a completely new path, one that leads to the surface after centuries of dormancy. In some cases, entire rivers have been known to change course due to significant tectonic shifts, sometimes creating new riverbeds that flow through previously dry land. What makes this theory particularly compelling in the case of the reappearing river is the possibility that the river's source may not be a single aquifer, but rather a network of underground rivers, aquifers, and springs that were once part of a larger, interconnected water system. The tectonic shifts could have caused fractures in the rock, reopening ancient water pathways that had been sealed off by the natural geological processes of the past. Over time, these shifts could have opened up the floodgates, allowing water to once again rise to the surface in a burst of energy that brings life to what was once a dry and barren landscape. Another element of tectonic movements that could be at play here is the role of fault lines. Faults are fractures in the Earth's crust along which movement has occurred. These faults can be enormous, stretching for miles and often resulting in significant shifts in the landscape. If the reappearing river lies along or near a fault line, the movement of the plates could have provided the necessary conditions for the water to flow once more. A small crack in the fault could have acted like a trigger, allowing the pressure to release from an underground reservoir, and suddenly, the water would have found its way to the surface. In areas where tectonic activity is particularly active, the land can literally be reshaped in a matter of days, months, or years. Earthquakes, landslides, and volcanic eruptions can all contribute to the reformation of a landscape, and with them, the natural flow of water. The emergence of a river could thus be the result of a series of tectonic events that cause the land to shift, creating a new pathway for the water to travel. Once these shifts occur, there may be little that can stop the water from rising to the surface. Moreover, tectonic activity does more than just shift the land. It also affects the Earth's underground structure in ways we are only beginning to understand. When plates collide, they can create massive pressures beneath the surface, which in turn can lead to the formation of new underground reservoirs. The tectonic forces at play can cause the Earth's crust to stretch and crack, allowing water to seep into previously uncharted areas. These processes, which happen deep underground, are difficult to study in real time. Still, the results are evident when a lost river suddenly reappears, seemingly out of nowhere. It's as if the Earth, in its slow and powerful movements, has simply given the river the space it needs to flow again. But tectonic movements alone might not be the whole story. In fact, the interaction between tectonic forces and other environmental factors, such as climate change or shifting weather patterns, could also play a role in this event. Earth's tectonic forces have always been intertwined with the planet's surface conditions, and the effects of one can often exacerbate or trigger changes in the other. Could the combination of tectonic shifts and a changing climate have worked together to bring this ancient river back to life? As we continue to examine the many factors that could have led to the river's dramatic return, one thing is certain: the process of tectonic activity is not something we can easily predict, nor can we fully comprehend the forces that shape our planet's surface over time. What we do know is that the Earth's tectonic plates are constantly in motion, and these movements are powerful enough to reshape the land, shift watercourses, and reveal long-forgotten rivers that have remained hidden for millennia. The return of this ancient river is likely just another example of how, beneath the surface, the planet is a far more active and dynamic place than we often realize. Let's now transition into another fascinating potential cause for the reappearance of the river, one that blends both geological and environmental factors: climate change. While tectonic movements and underground aquifers certainly hold compelling explanations, the role of environmental shifts, particularly the changing climate, cannot be overlooked. In fact, the ever-evolving patterns of the Earth's climate might have been the catalyst needed to bring this ancient river back into existence. Climate change is a term that has become synonymous with long-term shifts in weather patterns, especially in relation to the rise in global temperatures and the resulting impacts on the Earth's ecosystems. But its effects go far beyond melting glaciers and rising sea levels. Over millennia, the planet's climate has shifted numerous times, shaping the natural world in ways that we can still observe today. These shifts, both gradual and sudden, can dramatically alter the landscape and influence water systems. A significant change in the local or global climate could be the trigger that allowed this lost river to reappear after thousands of years. One of the most direct ways climate change could influence a river's reappearance is through precipitation patterns. Rivers, lakes, and other water bodies are fed by rain and snowmelt, and any significant alterations in how much water falls from the sky can impact the flow and existence of these bodies of water. If a region that had previously been dry or arid began experiencing significantly more rainfall due to shifts in local climate patterns, the once dormant river could suddenly become active again. This is especially true for regions where underground rivers or aquifers were already present, but where they lacked the surface water needed to bring them to life. Imagine a region that had once experienced a steady, predictable climate with mild or minimal rainfall. For centuries, this steady state would have kept the ancient river underground, hidden from sight. However, if the area began to experience increased rainfall due to changing weather patterns, this could cause the aquifers and underground water sources to fill up more quickly than they ever had before. Over time, as the water table rose, it might have created enough pressure for the river to force its way back to the surface, spilling over and flowing freely where it once did not. But what could cause such a drastic shift in precipitation patterns? Scientists point to several factors, many of which are related to global climate change and the shifting dynamics of Earth's weather systems. As the global climate warms, certain regions experience more intense and frequent weather events. The jet streams, which are high-altitude winds that govern weather patterns, have been shown to shift in response to changing temperatures. This can result in unusual weather for specific regions, including longer or heavier rainfalls. As these atmospheric changes occur, they could create the right conditions for a river to reemerge, even after being buried for thousands of years. Additionally, the influence of El Niño and La Niña, periodic shifts in ocean temperatures and atmospheric pressure in the Pacific Ocean, can have profound effects on global weather patterns. These phenomena often lead to extreme weather events, such as floods or droughts, depending on the phase. If the region where the river once flowed was experiencing such an event, the result could have been a sudden influx of rain, contributing to the resurgence of water flow in long-dormant riverbeds. Furthermore, the warming of global temperatures can lead to the melting of glaciers and snowpacks, particularly in mountainous regions. The melting of glaciers, which had previously acted as massive freshwater reservoirs, can have a direct impact on nearby rivers and streams. As glaciers melt, they release vast amounts of water, feeding into rivers and replenishing underground aquifers that had previously been dry. In places where an ancient riverbed had been cut off from its water source for millennia, the newly released meltwater could flow into the riverbed once more, pushing it to the surface and bringing life to the long-forgotten channel. But how does this tie into the specific river in question? One possibility is that the region where the river is located experienced a shift in its own localized climate, with weather patterns becoming more conducive to sustaining the river's flow. This could involve a range of environmental factors, such as increased rainfall, changing snow melt patterns, or shifts in regional wind currents that brought more moisture into the area. In many parts of the world, these localized weather changes can have a profound impact on local ecosystems, sometimes causing rivers to reappear in places where they had been absent for millennia. Another aspect of climate change that could be at play here is the changing hydrological cycle. As the Earth warms, evaporation rates increase, causing more moisture to be released into the atmosphere. While this could lead to droughts in some regions, it can also lead to more frequent and intense rainfall in other areas. These fluctuations in water distribution can disrupt existing ecosystems, including the flow of rivers. In places where rivers had been covered by sand or debris due to long periods of drought, an increase in precipitation could wash away these obstructions, allowing the water to flow once again. As we consider the possibility of climate change playing a role in the river's reappearance, it's important to remember that this theory doesn't necessarily rely on a single factor. Rather, it's the culmination of multiple, interconnected changes in the environment that can produce these unexpected results. The impact of human-induced climate change may be more immediate and visible, but the natural cycles of the planet are also playing a significant role in shaping the world we see today. A region that was once arid, dry, or cold could suddenly experience more frequent or intense rainfall, which in turn leads to the resurgence of a river thought to be lost forever. Now, let's take a step into the more speculative realm, where the boundaries of possibility start to blur, and we enter the territory of mystery and ancient legends. While tectonic shifts, climate change, and environmental factors offer grounded and scientifically plausible explanations, there's another fascinating possibility that we must consider: the influence of ancient civilizations and their long-forgotten technologies. Yes, this one may sound more like the stuff of myth and adventure, but let's explore it. Could it be that this river's reappearance is linked to ancient human ingenuity, or even to a technology far ahead of its time, lost to history? Picture this: ancient civilizations, far more advanced than we often give them credit for, once roamed the earth, constructing elaborate structures and systems to control water, agriculture, and even the very landscapes they inhabited. From the ancient Egyptians and their sophisticated canal systems to the engineering feats of the Indus Valley civilization, early humans demonstrated a deep understanding of hydrology, geography, and the flow of water. What if some long-forgotten civilization, using now-lost techniques, constructed a water system so complex that it manipulated rivers and streams to flow in ways we can scarcely imagine today? Think about it. There are myths, legends, and even some recorded ancient texts that hint at technologies far ahead of their time. The famous story of Atlantis, for example, speaks of a civilization with highly advanced infrastructure, including canals and waterways that were manipulated for purposes beyond what we would have thought possible in the ancient world. While the reality of Atlantis remains speculative, there are accounts of other ancient cultures with equally remarkable waterworks systems, some of which included the ability to redirect or even resurrect waterways that had disappeared for centuries. Could it be that the river we are seeing today is a remnant of such ancient, forgotten ingenuity? Let's dive into the idea that, thousands of years ago, this ancient river may have been deliberately rerouted or even buried by some lost civilization. This could have been part of a broader strategy to manage water for agricultural purposes or for use in large-scale irrigation projects. Perhaps the river was diverted underground to serve the needs of a thriving city or settlement, where access to water was vital for the survival of the population. In the ancient world, civilizations often built elaborate canal systems to manage the flow of water, and it's entirely possible that a river, like the one we're discussing, was part of this ancient infrastructure, diverted or concealed until it was eventually forgotten by history. The idea of using advanced methods to control water is not as far-fetched as it sounds. Consider the ancient Romans, who built aqueducts that transported water across vast distances to supply their cities. These aqueducts were marvels of engineering, and some of them are still in use today. Could it be that a similar system was once built in the region where this ancient river is now reappearing? Maybe it was part of a broader civilization that managed water with an expertise we've lost over the centuries. The fact that civilizations long gone were able to manipulate rivers and create systems that defied the natural flow of water shows just how much we could be underestimating the knowledge and techniques of the ancient world. This brings us to an interesting and highly speculative possibility. What if this river wasn't just naturally diverted, but actively sealed off and hidden by those who once controlled it? Imagine a powerful, long-lost civilization that had mastered hydrology to the point where they could not only reroute rivers but also artificially seal them off. Perhaps they buried the river deep underground, hiding it from view, either as a strategic measure to preserve it for future use or to protect the land and people from a potential flood risk. If this civilization's knowledge of water manipulation was more advanced than we are capable of today, it's not impossible to think that they could have constructed elaborate barriers or locks that would keep the water out of sight for millennia. Over time, these methods would have been lost to history, leaving the river's location forgotten, and the land above it would have returned to its natural state. But what could have caused this sealed-off river to resurface now, after so long? Well, there's one theory that could account for it: a slow but persistent breakdown of the very barriers that were once created to keep the river hidden. These ancient structures, however advanced they were, would have been subject to the natural forces of decay, erosion, and time. As the landscape around them shifted, as earthquakes or floods altered the geography, it's entirely possible that some of these seals or barriers could have slowly deteriorated or cracked open. Perhaps, unbeknownst to anyone, the water had been building up in the underground river for centuries, and now, a combination of natural forces, land shifts, water table increases, or other unknown variables, has caused the water to break through the surface once again. It's almost as though the river, buried beneath the earth for so long, has been waiting for the right moment to return. Maybe, over thousands of years, the river was quietly replenishing itself, building up energy beneath the surface, until conditions were finally right for it to burst forth into the world once again. This scenario isn't entirely out of the realm of possibility, especially when you consider how advanced ancient civilizations were in understanding natural systems and how they were able to manipulate them for their benefit. What makes this theory particularly intriguing is the idea that ancient cultures might have anticipated the eventual need for the river to be released once more. Could they have constructed the system in such a way that the river would be sealed off temporarily, only to be revived when the time was right? This level of foresight and understanding of water cycles would have required an advanced understanding of not only engineering but also the natural rhythms of the earth, something that some ancient civilizations may have been capable of. As we venture further into the investigation of this phenomenon, one can't help but wonder what else from ancient times might be hidden beneath the surface, waiting to reveal itself. What other long-forgotten wonders and secrets are waiting to be uncovered? As we move into the realm of short-term impacts, the reappearance of this ancient river is not just a curious geological event. It could have a ripple effect on both the environment and human society, setting off a chain reaction of consequences that are both exciting and challenging. While we have been focusing on how and why the river has returned, it's crucial to think about what happens immediately as this mysterious event unfolds. The first few weeks and months following its reemergence could bring both opportunities and significant challenges, and these impacts could be felt in a number of different ways. Let's take a closer look at the potential short-term consequences. One of the most obvious and immediate effects of the river's return will be on the local ecosystem. If this river was once a vital source of water for plants, animals, and people, then its sudden reappearance could have an immense impact on the flora and fauna that have adapted to the current state of the landscape. New water sources could flood the surrounding areas, changing the balance of ecosystems. Vegetation that had been dormant, or even extinct in the region could suddenly spring back to life, nourished by the fresh influx of water. Animals that once relied on this river for hydration could start migrating toward the area, which could lead to an influx of wildlife in the region. Whether it's birds, small mammals, or larger predators, the return of the river might lead to a renewed population of species that had been displaced, or even the arrival of new species not seen for generations. These species might not all be able to adapt to the new environment immediately, creating potential tension between wildlife and local habitats. Some species might thrive, while others could face challenges in adjusting to the newly reintroduced waterway. In addition to the local flora and fauna, the reappearance of the river could trigger a chain of flooding events. Depending on the size and scale of the river, the sudden surge of water could overwhelm nearby rivers or drainage systems, causing localized flooding and potentially damaging infrastructure, homes, and farmland. This could be particularly problematic in areas that are ill-prepared for the reemergence of a water source. The water might also carry silt, debris, and even contaminants, affecting soil quality and water safety for both humans and wildlife. For the local human population, the sudden return of this ancient river could be a double-edged sword. On one hand, the immediate influx of water could bring benefits, particularly for communities that are located near agricultural lands or regions struggling with water scarcity. Farmers, for example, may rejoice at the newfound access to water for irrigation, potentially boosting crop yields after years of drought or unreliable water sources. In some cases, it could allow for the revival of crops that were once thought to be unsustainable in the region. Access to fresh water could also improve living conditions for rural communities, who may have been relying on wells or more limited sources for drinking water. However, there are significant downsides that could also emerge in the short term. The sudden appearance of a river can be unpredictable, especially in regions that have not had consistent water flow for centuries. Flooding might occur in unexpected places, especially if the land wasn't prepared for a large water source to return. Areas near the riverbanks could be at risk of flooding, especially if the riverbed has changed over time or if the banks have been eroded by natural forces. Homes, businesses, roads, and infrastructure could be damaged or even completely washed away, leading to significant economic losses and displacement of families. Moreover, the rapid change in the local environment could present health risks. Stagnant water from an ancient river might harbor diseases, bacteria, or even parasites that haven't been present in the region for centuries. The introduction of these potential hazards could overwhelm local health systems, especially in regions that are not accustomed to such an influx of water. The water could also bring with it new pathogens that local populations haven't been exposed to before, potentially causing outbreaks of disease. The sudden appearance of this ancient river could also cause serious strain on local infrastructure. Many communities are designed with modern systems of water management in mind, with dams, reservoirs, and pipelines that are set up to manage predictable water sources. The reemergence of a previously lost river could render these systems obsolete or unprepared to deal with the changes. In the short term, there would likely be a scramble to adjust to the new water supply, altering infrastructure, rerouting pipelines, and adapting to new flood management systems. Local governments might be caught off guard, especially if they didn't anticipate the return of the river. In urban areas near the river's path, this could lead to sewer and drainage problems. Cities and towns may need to revise their flood protection strategies or even reconstruct key infrastructure, as drainage systems could become overwhelmed by the sudden introduction of water. If this river runs through areas with older or poorly maintained infrastructure, the damage could be widespread, resulting in both temporary and long-term disruptions. As we shift our focus to the long-term impacts of this ancient river's reemergence, it's clear that the changes unfolding could reshape the very fabric of the region for generations to come. While the immediate effects, such as floods, infrastructure damage, and the excitement of rediscovered water sources, are important to address in the short run, the true test will lie in how the world adapts to this phenomenon in the coming decades. The long-term consequences will be felt across a spectrum of areas, including the environment, society, and even the global stage. This is where the true potential of this ancient river could either blossom into a lasting source of life and prosperity, or evolve into a disruptive force that leaves its mark on the landscape for centuries. Over the long term, one of the most profound impacts could be seen in the environmental landscape. The once dormant ecosystems that are now coming back to life will need to adjust to this new and constantly changing environment. The influx of water could shift entire regions of the ecosystem, creating a complex web of relationships between species that hadn't coexisted for millennia. Species that were once thought to be gone could find new opportunities to thrive, but this also means that certain species might struggle to adapt to the new conditions. We could witness the reemergence of ancient flora and fauna, but also the displacement of species that had come to rely on the absence of the river. Over time, this could lead to an ecosystem that, while more diverse, could become more unpredictable and fragile. There will be an ongoing need to monitor these ecological shifts carefully to ensure that the balance remains sustainable, and that no species, whether plant or animal, suffers unduly in the process. At the same time, the local human population will be faced with long-term decisions about how to manage this newfound river. In the immediate aftermath, there may be a rush to take advantage of the river's resources, but in the years to come, there will need to be careful planning to ensure that the water remains a reliable and safe source for future generations. The introduction of such an abundant water source could lead to long-term agricultural transformations. Farmers may adapt their crops to the water's presence, growing new varieties that hadn't been possible without it. In fact, we could see an agricultural boom in the region, as irrigation systems are re-engineered and crops that had once been absent from the area are reintroduced. However, this newfound abundance could also lead to over-reliance on the river, especially if the river's return is tied to long-term weather cycles or environmental factors that remain uncertain. If the river's flow fluctuates unpredictably over time, the same flooding that brought about initial prosperity could eventually lead to devastating droughts or water shortages, especially if farmers and communities fail to prepare for these shifts. The economy could also experience substantial transformations. For the communities near the river, the influx of water could eventually become an anchor for sustained economic growth. New industries, like hydropower or water-intensive manufacturing, could thrive in the region, supported by the river's renewed presence. This economic prosperity could spill over to neighboring regions as well, as transportation routes and trade networks expand to take advantage of the river's flow. However, there's the risk of dependency. The once hidden river's reappearance could create a false sense of security, leading communities to base their long-term development on an uncertain water supply. If the river's behavior becomes erratic or unpredictable in the future, the ripple effects could be catastrophic, destabilizing industries that came to rely too heavily on it. As global interest in the river grows, the area could become a focal point for research, exploration, and even tourism. Over time, the river's mysterious return could become a symbol of resilience, or even spiritual significance, with people from around the world traveling to the region to witness the phenomenon firsthand. While this could inject significant capital into local economies, it could also put a strain on resources. The influx of visitors, especially if not carefully managed, could lead to overcrowding, environmental degradation, and the potential for cultural clashes between longtime residents and outsiders. This sudden wave of attention could alter the social fabric of the region, with local communities forced to adapt to a changing demographic and increasing outside influence. The region could become a tourist destination, but also a place of tension, as the balance between maintaining the area's integrity and catering to external demands becomes harder to navigate. Moreover, the long-term presence of this river might stir up political tensions as well. With access to a vital water source once again, neighboring regions or even countries could begin to compete for control or influence over the river. The issues surrounding water rights have been a source of conflict throughout history, and the reappearance of a potentially valuable waterway could reignite old disputes or create new ones. The negotiation of water-sharing agreements and equitable access would become an ongoing issue, potentially leading to tensions between regions that were once unrelated. Over time, this could evolve into complex international diplomacy, with foreign powers becoming involved in the management of the river, its tributaries, and its surrounding lands. Additionally, climate change could alter the very future of the river itself. The resurgence of the river might be tied to broader environmental shifts in the region that are influenced by global climate patterns. If this ancient river's return is tied to an increase in rainfall, changing weather systems, or the melting of ice from higher altitudes, it could signal a changing climate pattern that will continue to evolve over the coming decades. This could mean that the river's existence is temporary or subject to dramatic fluctuations, adding a layer of uncertainty to its long-term role in the region. As the climate continues to warm and weather patterns become more erratic, the river might dry up again or swell to unpredictable levels, making it difficult for communities to depend on it as a reliable source of water in the future. Ultimately, the long-term impacts of this river's reemergence will depend on how humanity responds. There are incredible opportunities to revitalize ecosystems, strengthen local economies, and offer new hope to communities that have struggled with water scarcity. However, there are also profound risks in over-relying on this rediscovered water source, which could ultimately lead to an unstable future if not carefully managed. The long-term consequences of this river will not be determined by what happens today or next year, but by the choices that are made in the coming decades as humanity learns to live alongside this ancient force of nature once again. The river's future is uncertain, but it will undoubtedly leave its mark on the world for many years to come. The question now becomes, will we use this mysterious gift to benefit generations to come, or will we allow its unpredictable nature to shape our futures in ways we cannot yet foresee? Only time will tell. As we reflect on the remarkable and mysterious return of this ancient river, it's clear that what we are witnessing is not just a natural event, but an unfolding saga that could forever alter the region and even the world in ways we are only beginning to understand. The revival of a river that had been dormant for 5,000 years is an extraordinary phenomenon, and it has prompted numerous questions and theories as to its cause. Whether it is the result of seismic activity deep within the Earth's crust, or something more esoteric like changes in underground water reserves, or even the grander influence of a cosmic event, each possibility has its own implications and challenges. Regardless of the true cause, it is undeniable that this river's reemergence has brought to light many layers of potential outcomes that could have ripple effects for the environment, human society, and global geopolitics. Looking at the first theory, we considered how seismic activity, or changes in the Earth's tectonic movements, could have unlocked the flow of this river after millennia of dormancy. The sheer power and complexity of the Earth's geology makes such an event plausible, as shifting tectonic plates could open up previously sealed underground water pathways. If this is the true cause, it implies a deeper and ongoing transformation of the land itself, suggesting that the Earth is far from static and that even long-dormant features are subject to change. The impact of such seismic shifts could have long-lasting consequences on the surrounding ecosystems, potentially altering everything from plant and animal life to the very way the land is inhabited and cultivated. The consequences of such a powerful geological event could unfold over decades or even centuries, leaving permanent marks on the landscape. Next, we explored the intriguing possibility of underground aquifers being recharged or altered. The idea that the river could be the product of a vast underground water system long hidden beneath the surface sparks fascination. The prospect of ancient water reserves, water that may have been underground for millennia, suddenly becoming accessible again brings with it not just scientific interest but also tangible real-world consequences. Such a sudden and dramatic influx of water could be a blessing for arid regions, bringing new life and fertility to once barren lands. Yet, it also raises questions about the sustainability of this water source. If the aquifers have been replenished in a delicate equilibrium, overuse could deplete them faster than they can be refilled, creating a potential crisis in the future. How will people, communities, and governments respond to such a resource? How will they balance the immediate euphoria of new water with the long-term risks of overuse? The potential for climactic events influencing the river's return also deserves serious consideration. The interaction between cosmic events, like solar activity or even shifting climatic patterns, has a certain speculative allure. While this theory delves more into the realm of the unknown, it is not entirely out of the realm of possibility. If changes in the Earth's position relative to the Sun or fluctuations in solar radiation cause the river's resurgence, it would add an entirely new layer of complexity to our understanding of how planetary systems interconnect. The idea that such a phenomenon could be linked to cosmic events adds an element of uncertainty, as the cause of the river's reappearance may not be as simple as we imagine. Rather, it could be a combination of natural and cosmic forces coming together in an extraordinary confluence, an event whose repercussions are still yet to be fully realized. In this scenario, humanity might face future challenges in adapting to the unpredictable nature of the river and its fluctuating flow. The theory of human influence, though perhaps the least likely in terms of physical causation, remains an interesting lens through which to view the impact of human civilization on natural systems. Whether through deforestation, agriculture, or even the manipulation of water systems, it is possible that ancient cultures may have unknowingly contributed to conditions that led to the river's return. If this is true, it would underline the ways in which human activity can affect the environment in profound and long-lasting ways, even if those effects were not immediately visible. The global perspective of this cause would also highlight the interconnectivity of civilizations with their environments, and how actions taken thousands of years ago continue to influence the world in ways we may not fully grasp. As we've moved through the theories behind this phenomenon, we've also seen how the return of the river could transform local, regional, and global dynamics. The immediate impacts, such as flooding, infrastructure challenges, and the rediscovery of fertile lands, are just the beginning. These short-term effects would certainly capture the world's attention, but as we look to the long-term impacts, the true weight of this river's resurgence becomes clearer. The environmental effects could be profound, with ecosystems and biodiversity flourishing or struggling depending on how human activities and natural forces interact. The agricultural benefits of the river are tantalizing, but the risk of dependency on a water source that may not remain reliable makes it a double-edged sword. The long-term economic boom and new industries fueled by this water source could lead to prosperity, but that same prosperity could breed over-reliance and instability if not carefully managed. The global geopolitical landscape could shift dramatically as nations, or even regions, scramble for control or influence over this precious resource. Water, after all, has always been a source of conflict, and the sudden appearance of such a vital waterway could reignite tensions, with countries vying for control over the river and its surrounding areas. And as we gaze toward the future, the long-term societal impact will likely be just as significant. The social fabric of the region could change irrevocably, with new waves of tourism, research, and external influence flooding in. The delicate balance between preserving local traditions and accommodating outside interest would be an ongoing challenge. But more than just economics or politics, there could also be deep cultural and spiritual significance tied to the river's reappearance. For some, this event could be seen as a divine gift or a sign, sparking a renewed interest in ancient beliefs and practices. The river's significance may transcend its physical presence, becoming a symbol of rebirth or hope for the future. As we conclude our exploration of this ancient river's reemergence, it's clear that we are only scratching the surface of its potential implications. What began as a natural curiosity has blossomed into a complex web of possible causes, challenges, and opportunities. Whether the river is the result of seismic shifts, ancient aquifers, cosmic forces, or human actions, one thing is certain: its return is no simple occurrence. It stands as a testament to the dynamic and ever-changing nature of our world. As we move forward, the choices we make in how we manage this river, respect its power, and learn from its return will determine not just the future of the region, but potentially the course of history itself. Time will tell whether this river's return marks the beginning of a new chapter of prosperity, or a warning of the delicate balance that sustains life on Earth. Before we wrap up, if you've found this journey into the mystery of the ancient river as fascinating as we have, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on all our latest content. Your support helps us dive deeper into these incredible stories from around the world. And if you have any thoughts or theories on this incredible phenomenon, drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.